you're the first mentor I've ever had to acknowledge intuition, acknowledge energy, acknowledge all of that, because I was doing that and I always believed in that, but it was never put into business for me.
Right.
So after our VIP session, that really shifted so much for me in the best way possible.
Welcome to the Successful Mind Podcast. Today I have an amazing friend and guest, Candice Bar. How you doing, Candice?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Thank you.
How long has Luxe Life been on the air now? How long have you been doing this show?
So I've had my show for, I think, a little bit over 4 years now.
It's 4 years, been that long. And you were just telling me off air that you're opening a studio on Rodeo Drive?
Yeah, so we're actually opening up our studio on Rodeo Drive. It will actually be the first studio on the Rodeo Drive ever. And so it's our multimedia company, and then it's also, our radio station studio. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's in the works right now.
One of the things that's interesting is you are very prosperity driven, very prosperity mindset, very pro women success, which I absolutely love and adore about you. How did that come about? Like, how you have done really amazing things. Like I've only known you for about a year and a half, maybe, I think, something like that. Right. And
I think so.
Yeah. And you introduced yourself to me, but we knew each other through a mutual friend. And one of the things that I thought was absolutely fascinating was the way that you kind of stand in the example of what it is that you teach and the people that you interview and all the things that you do. But I know that it wasn't always that way for you. So what was your journey into where you are now? That's one of the things that always fascinates me about people that achieve massive success is what was that journey and what was that like for you?
It's been a crazy ride, as I think most entrepreneurial rides usually are. And I think the biggest part of the journey was absolutely mindset. It was just getting over my own stuff, my own crap, like having to learn quickly, having to, I usually call it take emotion out of things to move faster and harder. And by doing that in my world, or what has led to, I guess, my success to where we are now, has been having amazing mentors, helping cut down those blocks, like people like you, David. So honestly, I attribute a lot of the success to my mentors I've had throughout my life.
And but you weren't, is it fair to say you weren't raised with that mindset? There were things that you had to learn because when you said something I think is very important, that you had to take like the emotionality out of a lot of things in order to take a business
right,
and really move it forward, really have success. You've achieved a lot, especially in the people that you've been able to acquire to have on your show, the celebrities that you work with. That is a big feat. Like I know lots of people that would love to be able to have the outreach that you do, but you had to get out of your own way to do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm fourth generation, I guess you'd say entrepreneur. I think at the time it's probably fourth generation small business owner. I would say that I'm the first generation, what you call entrepreneur. So I was blessed enough to have a mindset with whatever you are doing, you own it. I did start out with that. So that was a leg up for me. But, just through life and kind of being hard-headed and having a lot of, things happen with me or to me, or I think that most things that happen in our life, we probably do that ourselves, or almost everything we do, we do it ourselves, good or bad. And so, again, it goes back to mindset. It goes back to taking responsibility for actions or lack of actions that you're taking. Taking real responsibility for your business, looking at your business as a business and not a hobby. And if you want to do that or move forward with that, I think being an entrepreneur, that's a lifelong commitment. I don't really believe you stop being an entrepreneur. So
Right.
it depends on what you want to do and how big you want to go. And I wanted to go big. So I had to absolutely get out of my own way.
Did you start out with this vision, or is this something that's developed over a period of time?
So I've been professionally networking for quite some time, since I was about, I would say 20. So it's been about 15 years. And that kind of came to me. I don't think that I went to that.
You
So
just
I
found
do
out you had a gift to do that, right?
I mean, I really believe that's my soul's purpose, to be on the earth, is to connect with as many people as possible, and then I can leave. But until I'm able to leave, I got to do my work. I got to do my job. And for me, I have to have fun doing it. So it has to be pleasurable to me, as well as be able to do my work and to do it well.
What do you like best about what you do?
I like to be able to see the results of either the client or the person I want to connect, and the connection that I put together flourishes to something even bigger than I could even imagine. Because most of the time when I make connections, I don't always know where that's going to go, but I know that that had to happen. So I love seeing where it goes, because it's always fun to watch that.
Yeah. So that's like an intuitive hit for you then? Like you just have this feeling this person is supposed to meet this person and you make that happen.
Absolutely. And I want to share too, because I owe a lot to you, David. I really do. And when I had my VIP day with you, that opened up so many doors for me, just emotionally, business wise, mentally, everything. And it really opened the floodgates to where we are now. Was a huge part of our success, I have to tell you. And so you're the first mentor I've ever had to acknowledge intuition, acknowledge energy, acknowledge all of that, because I was doing that and I always believed in that, but it was never put into business for me.
Right.
So after our VIP session, that really shifted so much for me in the best way possible.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that it did.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that it is a huge thing. Like, I think everybody has this voice in that's actually telling them which way to go. But we have so much external programming, from whether it's from our parents or society or wherever we get it from, that's constantly contradicting that. So it plays that argument in a person's head. They've got that chatter: you can't do this, or you're not good enough to do it, or you don't have the money, you don't know the right people, whatever. And more often than not, for a lot of people, that voice wins. But one of the things that we're seeing today, in part from people like yourself that are doing shows and bringing awareness to the world as how you can live your greatness. You embody that very, very well.
Thank you.
That people are becoming more aware of the possibility that they can do it. And between things like my show and your show and other people that are doing this, one of the things that I think that you're doing very well is you're bridging the gap of showing people what it's actually like to get there. Because like when we were kids, you see a celebrity and that's all you see. You see the end result of a celebrity, but you don't know what that person went through to get there. So sometimes in your mind, you put it together like it's magic. This person just appeared, or if they have some great talent and they were discovered, and that's, boom, now they're rich and they're beautiful and they got everything that they want. And we know that's far from the truth, that rarely actually happens that way.
It's been my experience through the people I met or interviewed or whoever. I'm sure you can probably say the same thing. It's usually the higher you go there, it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, whatever. The higher you go on a success ladder, typically the more shit you went through to get there. So it's like, I call it earning your stripes. So you're just being tested on, okay, great, you want that? You can absolutely have that, most definitely, but you're going to earn it.
For sure. Where do you see yourself going? Like 10 years from now, where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself going?
I mean, honestly, we're really building an empire. So, and it's happening as we speak. So if you think of like Kathy Ireland or Oprah or anything like that, that's really where Luxe Enterprise is going right now.
Is there does your company have like a mission statement? Is that like common knowledge? Is that something you could share, or is that private?
I don't know if it's common knowledge. I mean, I always say the world is our playground. I think I say that on every team meeting that we have. So there really is no limitations. I'm confident the team knows that. And I really do believe the world's our playground. We can do whatever we want. We can have whatever we want. There is no limitations whatsoever.
Right.
If we want it, if we need to get it, we'll get it.
Do you find in building your own team that it's difficult for people to buy into that idea, even though you model it? Like, do you have, because a lot of, here's the reason I'm asking this question. A lot of people that I talk to that are entrepreneurs that are building teams, they ask me the question, how do you get them to think the same way that you think, where there's no limitations and they don't stop when things get hard, or they don't stop when they're getting no's from the outside world? What's your experience with your team that way?
Well, and I actually want to throw that back on you and say thank you for that, because when I had my VIP session with you, you actually are the first person to ever suggest to me to get a business assistant and get a personal assistant and get a maid and get a whole team. And at the time, I was like, he's out of his mind. Like, I'll never be able to do this. But the second that I did all those things that you listed is when my company exploded. So, but going back to your question, is it hard to get them on that mindset? I don't think so for us, because we're pretty good about hiring and firing, and I'm very clear on who would be let go and who stays, and everyone knows the expectations. If something needs to be done, they know that they know upon hiring there is no.
Yeah.
You just get it done and you figure it out. And I think everyone on the team is pretty excited to be with us, because it's not just my company. They're a part of that growth. They're a part of that system. They're a part of us building and growing more and more. And I think a lot of them take a lot of pride in being with us and being where we are at the stage that we're at. So every time we have a win, it's not just my win. It's not just the company's win. It's their win as well. So we really are, we're in it together. We're in the trenches together.
Yeah. So that's like a celebration for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Tell us about, let's say, the most difficult thing that you've had to overcome business-wise to get where you are. Biggest challenge?
I would say business and personal, because for me, I'm not sure about every entrepreneur, it's hard for me to separate business and personal. I think for me, it's all the same thing.
Okay.
I would say the biggest challenge for myself, and probably a lot of other people that I've heard of, is letting go of relationships, whatever relationship that looks like, professional, personal, whatever, when they need to be let go to be able to flourish and to grow, even if it hurts you or that hurts the other person. If that's no longer serving in a positive way, to be able to dissolve that relationship for probably the best of both sides. But if something's holding you down or holding you back in any kind of way, it has to go. Yeah,
it is the number one thing. So I've been in business for 21 years this year. It's the number one thing with every person that I've ever coached, as far as the biggest problem in building their business. It's relationships. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest surprises is that they were under the assumption that once they became successful and they had some idea of how to do it, that everybody in their life would want to do the same thing. And they were shocked when they didn't. And sometimes vehemently attacked because they were going in some direction and leaving them behind, or they had a sense of entitlement or whatever. And they had to get over the pain of the loss of those relationships.
Yeah. I want to touch on that too. Like, sometimes it can be family, it can be close family. It doesn't matter who the family member is. It can be anybody, or it can be friends that you've known or had for a long time, that they're nice people, they're great people. Also, I will say, not only when the relationship is no longer good for both sides, also when one of the parties is stagnant, you have to be able to let that go too.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're good people or bad people or whatever. It's being stagnant. You don't have the time. When you ask someone a question like, what are they doing? What's new and exciting? If the answer is always same old, they have to go.
Yeah, absolutely. They've totally stopped growing. They're just going to stay right where they are. The other thing that I do with people is, like, I won't discuss the past. I don't sit and kind of reminisce over the good old days. Like, I don't believe that they were that good to begin with, and they're old, so I don't want anything to do with them. I'm just looking for what the future, I'm looking forward. That's all I really want to talk about, is where we're going, not where we were. But is that now, being that you came from a line of business people, do you think you inherently knew that? Was that something that you were taught about, that you had to let non-productive relationships go, or did you have to learn that along the way?
Let's see. I would say, watching my father, I was usually with him at the businesses, like doing the cash register or something like that. And my dad's a really sweet soul, very sweet guy, very sensitive.
Yeah.
We were polar opposite. And I saw him getting hurt from people, emotionally and business wise, just because he was being a nice guy, and that really hurting him and not serving him at all. So I remember telling him at a young age, like 10, 11, 12, like, stop talking to that person. Like, they don't treat you the way that you treat them. So I did see that growing up. And it probably has served me today, but I always felt bad for my dad.
Yeah.
He was a little too nice.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate, because, well, I don't mean unfortunate for you, because it was something that you became aware of at a young age, so you were able to recognize it when you got older. But it is unfortunate for very empathetic people, because they so think that they're going to hurt somebody's feelings if they say no, or they draw a boundary, or this isn't appropriate, or, like you said before, it's not necessarily that this is a bad person. They could be great people. Most of them actually are great people. They just don't have any vision to go any further than where they are. So,
and going off of that, like, I think sometimes, like, when we're coming up in life and becoming more successful, you might feel the need to, like, save people or want to bring them with you, but we can't afford that. Like, we're trying to get up ourselves. Like, they need to be able to willingly want to come, but we cannot drag them along.
Right. I had a mentor of mine long time ago, mid-90s. I hit a point where I was stuck. And I didn't understand why I was stuck, because I was following all the directions that I had been given, but I had just hit this plateau. So I went and I asked him, and he looked at me like right in the eye, and he said, "Your problem is you don't want it bad enough." And he turned around and he walked away. He wasn't giving me any other explanation. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said, "You don't want it bad enough." And he turned around and walked away from me. And I remember being pissed. Like, I was fuming pissed. I left the conference. I started driving home. And on the way home, I thought to myself, after I got done calling him every name in the book in my head, I said, what if he's right? Where would I see evidence of that if he was right? And what I recognized instantly in that moment was that I was stopping when I got caught in somebody else's story about why they couldn't, like why they couldn't buy or why they couldn't participate. It was always, they had the perfect story. And my response was, okay, I get it. I understand life's in the way or whatever. When you're ready or whatever, then you'll do something. But I didn't know that I was being literally sucked into other people's story, because I was agreeing with that story as being a reason to stop. So
yeah.
I had to overcome that in my own mind. Like, why do I believe that that's true? And how could that possibly be true if I'm going to go where I want to go? That those excuses cannot be valid in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
With all the people that you've connected, tell me a story about, like, the biggest outcome of one of those connections. Tell me something that's happened that's been pretty amazing, that even blew you away.
I think the first one ever was when I was first starting the connection networking company, and I had brought on a client, and she was a pretty big deal. She was a powerhouse, kind of hard ass. I liked her. And she had said, I want to meet Richard Brinson. And at the time, you might as well have said to me, I want to fly to Saturn and, live on Saturn. I mean, you probably should have just said that to me. And for whatever reason, I said, yeah, I can do that. And I wasn't bullshitting. I really believed that I could do that, even though it was the beginning and I did not have the network we have now at all. And I was thinking, okay, problem solving. How can we do this? It's not that we can't do this. How can we do this? How can we make this happen?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, someone I met in a women's restroom years prior, used to bring people to Necker Island to meet Richard Brinson, and I haven't spoke to her in years at the time. So I called her and I said, I know this is a long shot, but are you still doing those things? Are you still connecting people to Necker Island to meet Richard Branson? Da 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 da. She wants to have a private meeting with him. Anyway, long story short, after several different phone calls, we made that happen, and that was in the beginning of the beginning. So that was a big deal. I would say more recently, a bigger connection that we made was I have a client, and her dream was to sit on the medical board of the Vatican, and we have recently done that for her. So,
Oh, wow. That's pretty amazing.
Those are some bigger ones.
Yeah. But so in that, one of the things that is interesting that you said is that it's, how can we do this? As if there's already a way to do it, and you just need to think about what is the way to actually have that happen, versus it can't be done, or I don't know how to do it, so I'm not going to put any energy behind it whatsoever, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that, and I know that you absolutely know this, and probably your listeners and viewers know this, but I've always been one of my keys to success, or one of my assets that I've always had since I was younger. I always had a great faith, and whatever that faith looks like to someone is neither here nor there, but I always had a great faith and seeing the unseen. So it's not surprising to me when these things happen, because I know I call them divine downloads.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to get downloaded, and then I can execute.
Yeah, I agree. And that a lot of people, either they don't believe in that, or they don't believe that that has a place in business or necessarily in success itself. But what I have found in the people that I've met over the years is they almost all believe in that to some degree. They don't necessarily talk about it publicly, but if you talk to them privately, they will tell you that there was, like, they got a download, they got a hit, whatever it was, something came to them that said, you can do this. And I have always found this interesting. I was listening to a minister one time talk about, and she was actually like one of the very first televangelists that got on TV that was a woman, because back in the day, women were not supposed to preach, right? So she starts exploding on TV, and this is in the 90s. And she said that she started this little Bible study on, I think it was on Thursday nights, in her living room. And she got this download that she said told her to take her ministry, go north, south, east, and west, but that's all that it said. So she started going to these other churches. And then she got another one that said, you need to be on television. And she told this story, and I'm sitting there listening to this. She told this story. She said, so I prayed on it, and I prayed on it, and I prayed on it. And I'm like, this can't be me. Nobody's going to fund me to do this. There's no way, everybody's going to reject me in the Christian community because they don't think that women should be preaching. And
Right.
She was so convinced that she heard it wrong that she wasn't actually doing it. And she started having all these problems show up that she didn't have before. So one day she was like, God, I just don't get it. Did I hear you wrong? And God's response to her was, I told you to go do it. I didn't tell you that you would be accepted. Nobody else knows what you're supposed to do but me. So that's when she went out and did it. Now she has like one of the biggest ministries on TV that there is. Like, she's got a multi-$100 million ministry. And I've heard other people say the same thing, that just because I have the idea and I see it doesn't mean anybody else is going to. So part of my job is to bring whatever my vision is to wherever I'm supposed to go, and then be a person of influence in that arena so that other people can buy in to the vision. So I think that's pretty cool, right, that you believe in that too, and that you get that kind of guidance for yourself.
And I agree with what you were saying. I think a lot of people, especially people that have reached, success, they all have this certain belief, whether they talk about it or not. Everyone I've met has that. So I think I would say I'm not scholastically smart. I'm just good at following directions.
I hear you. Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. Can you talk a little bit about what you do on your show? What is it that, yeah, go ahead.
So we interview entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, celebrities that are entrepreneurs as well as just being a celebrity, and up and coming entrepreneurs. And we talk about the real life journey of that person and the ups and downs and the blood, sweat, and tears and the mental breakdowns and the many successes along the way, because it all doesn't suck. And everything in between, their life, their journey, their story. It's unscripted, it's uncut, it's raw, it's real, and you're going to get the story right from the person's mouth.
And if a person wants to learn more about your show, where can they go to?
They can go to just CandiceBar.com, and then all the platforms the show is on is on there. But you can go to Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Roku, all over the place. It's just Luxe Life with Candice Bar.
Do you have a vetting process for bringing people on?
We do. You have to show how long you've been in business for, what your story is. I just have I use my intuition a lot. I just have an intuitive yes or no kind of deal. And, not every celebrity comes on the show. I know people are surprised by that. I don't want everyone on the show. There's something specific I'm looking for in everyone. And I can't always vocalize what that is. I just have a feeling about it.
Yeah. You'll know it when you see it, right?
Exactly.
What, has there ever been anything that you hear in these stories that's really surprised you?
I think everyone's story, because I never look them up or do background checks or Google them or anything beforehand.
Yeah.
Ever. So I want to hear it fresh and new, like everybody else is hearing it, no matter who it is. So I think there's always something to learn from someone. And I find everyone's life to be fascinating, because you'll never hear the same story twice. And to me, that is fascinating, how they did things, how they decided to do things, how they decided to take a situation that other people might fold and make it their own and move forward with it in a positive way. So I always find everyone fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I do too. I think one of the most fascinating parts of an interview with an individual is when, like, what was it a moment in time, or was it just a progression where you knew that you were going to do something that was extraordinary, that that your life was going to be beyond average? Like, what is that where that kind of clicked in for you? Because what's interesting about it is, even when I listen to other people do interviews and they get around that topic a little bit, very often they will talk about how they were in a very normal situation and they saw themselves, and this is not in a demeaning or an arrogant way, but they just saw themselves different than everything that was around them. They didn't necessarily know where they were going. They didn't know how they were going to get there, what it was going to be, but they knew they had to go somewhere else in order to do what they did. And you did that too, right? You're from the East Coast, is that right? Isn't that what you told me?
Yeah, I'm from a very small town in New Hampshire.
Yeah. And you went to the opposite side of the country to do what it is that you do. And that was instinct, right? That did that?
Well, I always knew at a really young age, like, I had to get out of there, I had to get away.
Yeah.
And that's not talking poorly about New Hampshire or the town I'm from. But for me, I knew really young it wouldn't have served me. Like, I used to, from the town I was from, which I don't think it's even on the map, I used to go to the larger city in New Hampshire, drive all the way there, go pick up like Italian Vogue at 13, which I promise you no one in that town was talking about Italian Vogue.
Yeah.
And then drive back. I used to drive into Boston when I first got my license. This is when we had fold-out maps before GPS.
Yes.
And Boston, as anyone knows, is very confusing. I probably still get confused to this day. And I would go make myself get lost on purpose and make myself find my way out without using the map or asking directions, because I wanted to see if I could do it. So that was the beginning.
That is interesting. That is absolutely very interesting. The games that we play with ourselves that are actually going to allow us to solve much bigger problems earlier on. I think it's fascinating. I'm a geek when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think it's really cool. What
So I think to
is,
go back to what you were
yeah,
saying, like I think it's usually better when we don't know the end result, because we probably wouldn't do it if we knew the end result. But I think that with people, it's very telling throughout, especially childhood, where they're going to end up and how their personality is, because that's going to show you exactly where they're going to go.
yeah, for sure. I know that when I was stuck in my life in the beginning, when I was driving a forklift, if you would have showed me what I'd be doing today, I would not have believed you. I mean, completely
No.
would not have believed you. I would be like, there's no way that's
Yeah.
me. There's absolutely no way. But it was following one intuitive hit after another, And even in the very beginning, I was asking people, like, do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is a good decision? And almost hands down, people would say, no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. And it was like, I knew I needed to do it anyway and see what happened, which didn't always turn out well for the people that were involved in my life at the time, because they didn't really like that. But ultimately, if I hadn't made those decisions, nothing would have ever changed. And I knew the same thing with Chicago. I had to get out of there. I was never going to get what I wanted there and around the people that I was around. And Chicago's a great city, so it had nothing to do with that. It was just the people that I had surrounded myself with since I was a kid.
And I always say, it wasn't them, it was me. It wasn't for you, it wasn't them, it was you. Like,
totally,
you had to get out.
Yeah, it was absolutely me. I needed to see something completely different than I had been inundated with my whole life, and seeing it the same way. And I remember going back for some things. I had to go back to Chicago for some reason. And because I spent so many years there, there was basically nowhere I could go where there wasn't a memory of some kind. And I thought, this is not good. This is really not good, because I could instantly see myself back in whatever situation with whatever person I was involved with at the time, doing whatever it was that I was doing. I was like, I don't need those flashbacks. I got to stay the hell away from here. So
Yeah, no, I'm good.
yeah, exactly. What is let's kind of wrap this up a little bit. Give me something that you would love to leave all the listeners with. It's either inspirational, educational, piece of advice. What do you have?
It kind of ties into what we were saying pretty much the whole interview. And I always say this constantly, and I do live by this. Be very careful. Be very, very careful. Really guard yourself on who you decide to take advice from. Because, and I think you say this all the time, even if they come from the best intentions, if they are not doing what you desire to do, and you would not trade your life with them, do not take any advice from them at all. And people who are, I find, underqualified to give advice on anything, usually give the most advice. Be very careful who you decide to take advice from.
That's brilliant. I love it. I agree with that absolutely 100%. I had my mentor told me, he said, find somebody that's 100 miles ahead of you and go seek advice from them, but don't ever seek advice. Well, he used to say, don't ask your neighbor what to do, because we're in the same situation or worse than you are. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. You're brilliant as always. And I encourage everybody, the listeners, to check out Luxe Life. Candice is doing an absolutely amazing job. She has unbelievable guests with unbelievable stories, and you want to keep this person, you want to keep Candice in the forefront of your mind and watch where she's going, because she is a shining example of empowered women and what women can go out there and do in the business and world, and what their message. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, David, for having me.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon. Thanks for joining me. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them below and let's continue the conversation.